morning. Good morning. Delighted to see you all out here this morning. And I'm looking around. If anybody has a jacket on, there'll be a severe fine because it's too bloody hot to be sitting out here. Anyway, we're going to start because we have a really exciting morning for you and some unbelievable things that you're going to learn and hear about. So I would ask that the color guard to post the colors of the Pledge Allegiance to the flag, the Marietta chapter of the SAR.
The turn, mark. Color guard, off. Left turn.
Pledge allegiance.
Present. Arm.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, arm. Post colors. Color guard, dismissed.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our invocation today will be led by Scott Britton, who is the chaplain and historian of the Marietta chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution. Scott?
Please. Almighty God, as we gather here to celebrate one of our greatest American documents, the Northwest Ordinance, grant us open minds and ready hearts to understand the wisdom and guidance of our founders and patriot ancestors that have been passed down to us. May we honor the dreams of our forefathers and mothers, some entirely fulfilled while others fell short. May their vision be fulfilled in us, that their legacy will continue. In your name we pray, amen.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to call on the Honorable Mayor, Josh Schlicker, of the City of Marietta, to give us a formal welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you, first of all, for your time to be here this morning, to listen to the presentation, and just to be here. It means a lot to all of us. An organization, you hear that? All of us have had something to do with the organization of this. And so, again, thank you for being here. And I just want to give thanks to everyone that put this on, Gene and the crew. So enjoy your day and the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supposed to give a welcome, but I'm going to skip it because everybody who's here today is part of this celebration of history and the passion and acknowledging the blueprint for the formation of a new republic, of a new nation. We were incredible. We still are. And we have a lot to say and we have a lot to learn. At this time, I would like to welcome Todd Kleisman, who's a good friend of mine, who's the chairman of Ohio, America 250 Ohio. I keep putting Ohio first. I don't mind. And as a member of the commission, I have witnessed firsthand his incredible energy and enthusiasm statewide in leading this celebration. Todd, a few words, please.
Sure. Good morning, and thank you, Nancy. Again, my name is Todd Kleisman. I serve as the Executive Director for the America 250 Ohio Commission. Nancy is among 29 commission members that we have. There's another Marietta native serving on our commission. Although she couldn't be with us, Kim Murnix serves as the Director of the Office of Budget and Management for the state of Ohio.
Just take it out.
For the state of Ohio, and we're very proud to have her association with the commission. She's actually the governor's designee to our commission. And so it is very important for our commission, which launched in 2022, to fully embrace this huge opportunity that we all share. This belongs to all of us. Although we're heading up a lot of the activities statewide here in Ohio to fully participate in the nation's 250th, every state is doing something similar to us, not nearly as well, but they're doing something. And we are, fully embracing this opportunity to really lean into those touch points we have to the American Revolutionary War era, that time in our history. And there are few things that are more meaningful to that right here in Ohio, and I would say for the entire Midwest, than the Northwest Ordinance. So it is a thrill to be with you on the anniversary of that super important historical moment for us. So hopefully you will see lots more activity from us in these next 2 years leading up to 2026. We're not waiting around for 2026. We are engaged. We are doing activities. We're going to have all 88 counties highly engaged in this journey with us. So thank you for being part of that journey with us today. So thrilled to be here. I look forward to hearing from Gleaves Whitney, our speaker, and just can't thank our sponsors enough. Our America 250 Ohio Commission is very proud to be among the sponsors. So many thanks to people like Gene Yost and Nancy Hollister, and I think Nancy Arthur. So if you want to find out more about the America 250 Ohio Commission, please visit us down where the other tables are. We're just so pleased to be part of this, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you.
One of the responsibilities of the Master of Ceremonies is to recognize special guests. And I've made an executive decision that everybody here is a very, very special guest and an honored guest. And again, I thank you for being here. So at this time, it is with great pleasure I get to give you a few words to explain our next speaker. And I had the opportunity to meet with him last night at the Constitution documentary, and he was amazing. We talk about energy. You talk about a depth of knowledge and history. This represents Gleaves Whitney, who is one incredible human being because he is the executive director of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation in Michigan. Yes, Michigan is part of the Northwest Territory and a key part of the Northwest Territory. Ohio leading the way. Michigan absolutely is so important to all of us and was so important in the founding of the Northwest Territory. So Mr. Whitney has been an editor of almost 11 books, maybe more, pertaining to Midwest history in a number of documents. He has a special focus with authors and historians and professors from an academic and an educational perspective to try to revive the history of the Midwest with more enthusiasm, more explanation. All too often, we reduce things to just minute points of interest that everybody knows. This is a way to educate a vast number of our country on just how important the formation of the Northwest Territory was, because it was done with purpose and determination to expand a new republic, but to create new forms of government and give everyone a fresh start. But especially the abolition of slavery in the Northwest was key and critical for a vast number of reasons. And Mr. Whitney has been focusing on this. He is quite a respected person on the knowledge and the depth of the Northwest Ordinance. But in looking through his biography, because anyone who's involved as he has been has pages and pages, so you got to reduce it. You got to say, okay, what's important? To me, the gentleman in question, who's our speaker today, worked with Governor John Engler of the state of Michigan. So I know he was well-trained, well-educated, as well as his opportunity as a speechwriter and historian for the state of Michigan to move things forward, as well as a member of a sweeping task force in the state of Michigan that did unbelievable education reforms, funding directions that led the country at that time. So based on my crossed background, I was very excited to see what his training was at one of the very beginnings of his career. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a very warm welcome to our speaker, Cleves Whitney.
Nancy, Governor, thank you so much for what a warm and wonderful welcome you've given me. I should have taped it so for my other audiences. No, seriously, Marietta has always been good to me and my family. I want to explain why. I had just taken my 3 boys to Williamsburg and the historic triangle there, you know, Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown, Yorktown. It was like the 6th or 7th time. This would have been back in the early 90s. And they were belly aching all the way back to Michigan. And they're saying, gosh, you know, Michigan's so boring compared to all the things that happen in the East Coast. Why don't we just move there? And I said, can't do that. I'm working for the governor. That's not going to happen. But what I can do is let's pick a place on the map that also has a great history that can be quite exciting to learn about. And so I took out my map. And of course, as a historian, I knew Marietta right back on the way back from Washington, D.C. to Michigan. And we chose to come here. And we stayed in the Lafayette Hotel. And it was a wonderful visit because the kids then, it caught their imagination, what happened here. I explained to them, this was an exciting period in American history. Gene Yost and I were talking about this last night. And I know Todd, 2 years ago, talked about this. When you think of all the tumult that the country was going through back in the 1780s, the people who came here, think of the people who surveyed it. I mean, now we got these $100,000 RVs, you know, we go roughing it in the wild with marble countertops and all that kind of stuff. Think of roughing it in this country at that time in the 1780s and the heroic efforts. I said to the boys, you want to go camping? Let's go camping the way. Oh, no, Dad, that's okay. We're not going to camp like that. So, yeah, with panthers and bears and all the rest. So it really was, I think, an impressive trip. And it taught me something about how important it is to link our history here in the Midwest with that of the East Coast so that people understand the deep roots. This very monument, this memorial that we're here looking at, I'm looking at the sandstone that the mayor tells me is going to be replaced with bronze. I mean, I think that this is going to be a wonderful monument to honor the patriot soldiers and the patriot farmers and the shopkeepers, the clergy who picked up and moved here. And just, I couldn't help as I was watching each of the speakers come up. Folks, I don't think I've ever had a more beautiful background. What a backdrop. The Muskingum River there, and what I'm looking at out here with, you know, the beautiful architecture. You have something so special here. You really do. This is a very special place, a great pilgrimage. In fact, I do call it a pilgrimage. Ever since that trip back in the 1990s, I said Marietta ought to be one of the pilgrimage sites. We always think about Boston. We always think about Washington, D.C., Colonial Williamsburg that we were just talking about. The California missions on the other side, or from my home state, Texas, the Alamo is a pilgrimage site. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a pilgrimage site. It's a really important pilgrimage site, as Nancy and Todd and others have said so eloquently just a few minutes ago. I thought what I would do in a few minutes is just explain a little bit of my particular interest in an aspect. My interest in the Northwest Ordinance kind of changes. I'll tell you what I've been thinking about a lot lately as our country goes through a lot of division and trouble. And I've thought often about the words of the Northwest Ordinance and how meaningful those words are as a potential source of healing. And I'll get to that in just a minute. The tumult that surrounds the Northwest Ordinance is only part of the story. It's the major part of the story. But the other part of the story is an incredible history of ideas. A history of ideas that informs the Northwest Ordinance and the U.S. Constitution that's being crafted at the same time, just, you know, down the road in Philadelphia. Well, Northwest Ordinance, New York, Constitution, Philadelphia in 1787. And that hot summer, a lot of days like today where the windows were nailed shut. And you can imagine how uncomfortable those delegates, those framers were. But they carried ideas with them that are our ideas, but we forget them sometimes. What were their ideas? Let me use the words of the preamble that Gouverneur Morris wrote at the end of the Constitutional Convention. What I'm going to do is I'm going to abbreviate it just a bit. Remember how the Constitution starts? Okay, so I'm a teacher, so here's a little test. How does the Constitution start? It's not when in the course of human events?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. We the people. And what does it say right after we the people? In order. Oh, okay. This is great. Maybe I don't even have to remind you guys of this then. You all don't forget. This is great. So there are 6 purposes of government in that preamble. And every one of those 6 purposes is to order freedom. That was the challenge. The colonial period, people saw a lot of abuses of freedom. So how do you order it so that you have a phrase that's going to come in from the Northwest Ordinance so that you create the conditions for the happiness of mankind? We're going to come back to that. So in order to form a more perfect union, they're saying, first of all, you've got to have a defined union. You've got to be able to have lines on a map, and you have to have a spirit of comity among the disparate parts of that union. Now, I think since everybody here knows the major parts of the Northwest Ordinance, you know that that was on their minds. For example, the very fact that they were bringing in new states, not to be colonies of old states, laid the groundwork for a more perfect union. Almost unprecedented in history. Was anybody in ancient Rome or ancient Greece doing that? Were any of the medieval kingdoms and the principalities doing that? No. They subjugated, they warred, they conquered, they subjugated, they made sure that the colony knew its place as an inferior to the homeland, the heartland, the hearthland. Okay, what's next? Establish justice. Boy, I tell you, you were the all-A student in school, right? No, I hardly ever go to an audience where they actually know this stuff. Establish justice is the second. Oh, okay. Okay, we'll allow him that, right? Establish justice. Well, look at what the Northwest Ordinance does to set up a system of justice. It puts so much emphasis. Now, as Pauline Meyer, so many people have said, hundreds of bills of rights had been created. And so a lot of the language of the previous bills of rights end up in the Northwest Ordinance. There's going to be habeas corpus. There's going to be, trial by jury. There are going to be other freedoms to set up a system of justice. Very, very important. So they're already doing that in July while they're trying to hassle through it all in Philadelphia. Then what's the next one? That's right. So the next one's ensure. That's the verb, to ensure domestic tranquility. You do that by an orderly administration of justice. What you're going to see in Gouverneur Morris's context here is that all 6 of these purposes of government roll out logically. So in other words, domestic tranquility is predicated on a justice system. A good justice system is predicated on unity, on a sense of this is us. And then the next one is, oh, you're good too. Did you take his class, young lady? You took his class? Well, you don't look it. So, and what's the verb for? So you have domestic tranquility, and then provide is the verb, for the common defense. Northwest Ordinance, they'd already solved that problem because they gave the governor and others the authority to form militias, right? So this is part of this whole pool of thought. They're meeting separately. We don't know how much they're communicating with each other, but in that pool of thought, that climate of opinion, they know the conditions for ordered freedom, and they're going for it with their best thinking and decisive action, much more decisive, in New York City at Federal Hall than in Philadelphia. And then what's after provide for the common defense? Oh, come on. Yes,
Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah, that's right. Promote the general welfare. Now, what does that mean? A lot of my students, people I talk to a lot of different groups, and they think, oh, welfare. So they're setting up safety nets and stuff like that. A different kind of safety net. It's infrastructure. They saw the purpose of government as providing the infrastructure, yes, to move armies. You got to be able to move armies, but also for commerce. So as part of that pursuit of happiness, now to recur to the Declaration of Independence, people can make a good living and fulfill their own aims as humans in a free republic. Now, after the general welfare, what happens in the preamble? It starts with an S. Secure. Secure what? The blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Think of that, securing the blessings. I always point out, grammar is always important. We teachers know that. Grammar is always important. Look at the word order. Freedom, liberty is not the main noun there. It's the object of a preposition. They want to secure blessings. Now, I'm going to bring that back to something in the Northwest Ordinance. And then liberty. Liberty is possible after you have union, justice, domestic tranquility. You're providing for the common defense. You're building infrastructure. And now the liberty, if you're carrying out all of those things, the logic now is that now you can be truly free. Not in some fake sense, but truly free because your whole community is enjoying the blessings of liberty. It's a community thing, but it respects the individual rights. So my argument is that at the Northwest Ordinance, where the committee of Western Lands is drafting that ordinance, Nathan Dane and so forth, they're already taking care of all these. And they do it so expeditiously. So I would say you have all of these people who are incredible geniuses in Philadelphia, and they are. I'm not denigrating them one bit. But why wasn't their thinking so much clearer in New York when they were doing writing the Northwest Ordinance? And it could be messy at times. There was some sausage making. Nancy knows about this. You can't make a major bill without, or write a constitution without sausage making. But I think that if you look then at where the Northwest Ordinance, the authors of the Northwest Ordinance actually, for my money, go beyond the Constitution framers. Now, we all understand the Constitution is framed. They have southern states. They have to deal with the slave owners and people who are sympathetic to it. So there's an automatic geographic advantage. However, don't forget that in the early 1780s, and you teachers back me up on this, every northern state had laws permitting slavery. Slavery is just recently a thing of the past in the North, but the point is, it is in the past. The abolitionists have won the debate. And one of the keys to understanding history is who wins the debates. Up here, it's going to be largely settled. So, slavery. This is one thing. You're not going to see these messy debates that you had in Philadelphia. In Federal Hall in New York City, it's very much clear that there will not be slavery. Now, there are debates. Ohio has its debates. I think in 1803, 1804, there had to, Cutler actually had to work to make sure that slavery would not be coming up here just across the Ohio River. But that's the point, isn't it? That many of the people who would have anything to do with slavery in this part of the world would be importing it. I'll give you an example. Right before COVID, I took a little trip. I started out here in Marietta, but I ended up in southwest Wisconsin and in northwest Illinois, where you have the Galena and the big mounds and everything. And I learned working in the archives there that slaves indeed were imported. They were brought in from Kentuckians who brought their slaves, and then they went up the Mississippi, up the Illinois River, and then to the Galena River. So we know slaves were in the Northwest Territory. It would be an error for any of us to stand up here and say, oh, there wasn't slavery. It did exist. But remember, folks, it's a frontier. and in a frontier as all of the mechanisms, all of the institutions of civilization are spreading. They get attenuated on a frontier, thinned out. And so it's hard always to establish justice right now the way it is in a settled community. So the Northwest Ordinance goes far beyond our Constitution framers by excluding slavery in theory and then enforcing it where they can as the institutions get built up. That's very important. They also talk a lot about religious freedom. I'm talking about Article 6 and Article 1 now. The religious freedom is so important to them. And I started out this morning over in First Congregational Church. Wow, what a beautiful church. You know, you're lucky here to have reminders of what would inform Article 3 of the Northwest Ordinance. I know you all know that, but let a guy from Michigan say it: religion, morality, and knowledge, being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Nothing happened like that in Philadelphia. They talked about it, but it never ended up in the document. Think of how far-seeing that Article 3 phrasing is. First of all, let's go back to grammar. Religion, morality, and knowledge. That is a bundled compound subject. It's all bundled together. And you know that because there's a comma after it. Religion, morality, and knowledge. And then it's followed by a participle phrase, what the grammarians call a participial. And it says, being necessary, to good government and the happiness of mankind, then schools and means of education shall forever be encouraged. What they're saying in their wisdom that we too often forget today is that you cannot be happy if you're not virtuous at some level. Now, I'm told by some of the youngins, I have a bunch of 20-somethings in my office, and they say, oh, please, that language is so old-fashioned, people don't buy it, you're going to find a different way to say it. No, I'm not going to find a different way to say it. Virtue is what we mean. Now, virtue is very broadly understood. It can be either Judeo-Christian based in faith, rooted in faith, or it can be rooted in sort of the secular Greco-Roman humanist tradition. Take your pick. There were great ethicists and people who studied moral philosophy in both traditions. The point was the people who founded Marietta were familiar with both traditions. They weren't saying congregationalism, morality, and knowledge. They were saying religion, morality, and knowledge. So they knew that there was something. If you devote your life, if you give your life to something bigger than yourselves, you can call that religion. But of course, there were a lot of people we would call, of course, very religious people. But can you be happy if you have a bad conscience? If you know you did something wrong, can you really be happy? No. If you're like most of us, I'm lying in bed at night, awake, going, oh my gosh, I didn't say this, or I said too much, or I missed the boat here, or, oh, the words I spoke were interpreted in a way that could have hurt their feelings, and then I get up in the morning and have to repair. All of us are married, know what that process is like every day, right? We get up and we say, okay, marriage is tough, but we're going to do better tomorrow, right? Isn't that the way marriage is? You cannot be happy if you have a bad conscience. And so, virtuous behavior is central and as good as you can be within yourself, in your thoughts, and to your neighbor. It is central. And the Northwest Ordinance, in its wisdom, is admonishing us about a human truth, a truth of human nature that we dare not neglect. Happiness today is often, well, it's two things often. It's either medically induced. Let's take the right. You go to your doctor. What make you happy? A little RX. It's either medically induced or it's physical sensation of some kind, right? Happy that you eat a nice big meal and you come out of the meal and you say, oh, I'm happy. That's great, But all of us in this audience know that happiness, joy is so much deeper than that. The framers of the Northwest Ordinance understood this human law so well. And they were admonishing us, not just in our individual capacity to be happy. They said the happiness of mankind, of humankind. They were worried, can all of us be happy? And that's where the rest of the Northwest Ordinance fills in the blanks. It's possible in this new upstart republic, in these terribly difficult conditions, it is possible for more of our brothers and sisters to be happy if they have that clear conscience, if they have a community, a well-ordered community, if they know there's reliable and quick justice, if they know there's internal, peace, if they've provided for the common defense, if they've ensured that the infrastructure works for everybody. It's not better for some than for others, but for everybody. And if people are securing the blessings of liberty, that's the key. And it's right there, all of it in the Northwest Ordinance. You just need to unpack it and tell people about it. So I think you have something really special here. I think it's a tutorial. It's a great tutorial in Ohio history. And I'm so excited to work with America 250, the Ohio Commission. It's a great tutorial in Midwestern history. We do have something special here. Something that other regions, I'm from Texas and I love Texas, but we have something so special here. It's a great tutorial for the country. And I think the Northwest Ordinance was such a progressive and meaningful document in the world stage in 1787. If you do a comparative analysis of other freedom documents, of ordered freedom documents, you don't see anything else quite like it. This is special. So this Michigan guy comes here and tells you what you already know. I guess it's my way of saying I hopped on your train. And I can't help but notice, as the 6 flags of the states that would become part of, the United States started out in the territories. I can't help but notice you set up the podium very kindly under the Michigan flag. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. We can leave enthused, a little better educated, and excited. But in listening to you talk, one of the things I decided after watching the documentary last night is I think maybe this was done structurally on purpose, that you put all the big guys in Philadelphia in a locked room, wearing a lot of wool, to argue and discuss, while you had another group in New York who were going to fill in the blanks, who had the opportunity in quiet, sometimes not so quiet, to make it real that could be part of our Constitution. Perhaps that was a thought. And it was a good one, based on listening to the debate and reading some of the things. But no, I thank you so, so very much. It is amazing. Okay. Now, Jean, I'm turning this over to you because we have an opportunity for
Well, the biggest
discussion.
opportunity is I do not want Gleaves to leave yet. And I guess we didn't talk about this, but does anybody have questions of Gleaves? I'm sure there's something in these documents. The ordinance, when I look across the river and 40% were slaves, 40% were indentured servants, and I'm missing the point, but how is that perceived? Do people even know that 80% were people that were basically bought and sold?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, Jefferson and others knew an ancient piece of wisdom. Already in the ancient world, people were saying that the slaveholder actually enslaves himself. When you submit yourself, and I come from one of the Confederate States of America, I remind you, I remember the lessons from school. And I think that understanding of what happens to the soul of the slave owner is true, is right on. You become enslaved yourself to the power, the need for the power, the need for labor to be done. Tocqueville comes along, in the 1830s, and he contrasts the Ohio side of the Ohio River, with the Kentucky side, and he says the people in Ohio are much happier. The human beings on this side of the river are happier because they work, they do honest work, and they develop their capacities. You know, I always say to my students, education is about expanding your potential as a human being. Work is about fulfilling your potential. Get it right. And the people in Ohio, Tocqueville observed, were able to expand and fulfill their potential in the way people in Kentucky. I hope there's nobody in Kentucky here. I'm from Texas, so I'm criticizing my own. But that's an important lesson.
So deep, can you hear this, man? Deep into West Virginia, where my ancestors, some of them came from, my grandmother and her husband, they paid tithes to Lord Fairfax. So to the Lord and ladies, they paid their tithes, not the church. But if her husband died, she couldn't inherit the property that they were paying tithes on. As we went into this new, women could get involved, women could own property. And the firstborn, if you weren't the firstborn son, you couldn't inherit. So this really brought around, and all this happened because of the ladies that were behind the men all during the Revolution. Say, if you're going to get down there and spend all that time in that dark, smoke-filled room drinking booze all night, you come back for something for the ladies. So I thought that was great. Now, Cleves is here for a lot of reasons. We had good recommendations, but then we were asked to do a deep dive. In the deep dive, this man was one of the first people that I met that really knew the Northwest Ordinance. He knew it frontwards, he knew it backwards. And at the Ford Foundation, and his 20 years before at a school I can't pronounce, it was presidential studies. How do we work together, bringing both sides to the middle of the table so that we can agree and get governance? And to me, that was as important as all you did on the Northwest Ordinance. And I'd like for you to speak just a minute on what you do on bringing both sides and scholars into your senator.
Well, thank you very much. And we do want to make sure that if anybody has a question out here, then you have a chance to ask it. So I've been very fortunate to work at the Hallenstein Center for Presidential Studies, and we had a National Endowment for the Humanities grant back in 2012 that enabled me to set up the first Common Ground initiative in higher education. And it was, I think, a great success. We would have people like Cornell West and Robbie George on the same stage. I'll tell you a funny little story. Can you hear me okay? Can everybody hear me? So Cornell West, he gets off the airplane there in Grand Rapids. And I don't know how many of you know him. Big guy. He's a big guy. He's coming in from Harvard. And, I walk up as I do all my speakers and shake his hand. And he says, Gleaves, we're not going to shake hands. We're going to hug. So I'm hugged by Cornell West. And the guy is just amazing. And then Robbie George from Princeton University also is an amazing scholar, but they would cancel each other's votes. Let's just put it politely like that. They definitely cancel each other's votes. That night, during the parade, we had a VIP lunch, and then we had a reception, and then we got them in the classroom so students could interact with them one-on-one. That night, at the feature attraction, I just finished introducing them. So I'm sitting next to my wife, and it's a love fest up on the stage. Just a love fest. Cornell saying, Brother Robbie, I think we would agree about this, but we probably disagree about this. And Robbie George would go, yeah, that's right, Brother Cornell. It's funny to watch Robbie George, say Brother Cornell. And so after about 15 minutes of this, my wife leaned over and she said, if all married couples acted like this, there'd be no need for counselors. And I'll tell you one more story about my work. Now, for the last 4 years, I've been at the Ford Presidential Foundation. My little line about marriage being tough and every day you get up and you try harder, that actually comes from the Fords. Mrs. Ford told me that back around 2003, 2004. because I was trying to resolve. I mean, I'm a polarity thinker. I like looking at the extremes and then finding where the truth is or where the sensibilities are, where we can actually go. And so I was asking Mrs. Ford more about that, and she, I think gave me the insight that she regarded her marriage to Jerry as a metaphor for all of us. Because see, he was kind of a stodgy fiscal conservative, right? Gerald Ford. And if you're fiscally conservative, you don't go out on a limb with a lot of new programs, as say Lyndon Johnson did with the Great Society. So that was his conservatism. She was a dancer, just a wonderfully vivacious personality, loved the parties, not stodgy in any sense, not overly formal, warm, liberal. So her personality was liberal and her policies tended to be more liberal. So I asked her, I said, okay, you and Jerry have been together for I said, you and President Ford have been together a long time. How did you make it work? And she said, well, it's the way every organization, every family has to make it work. You have to forget some things, you have to forgive some things, and you keep your eye on the prize. You stay focused on what your purpose is as a married couple, getting your kids out of the house successfully launched through college, whatever it is. You keep those eyes on the prize. And then when you can, you enjoy each other's company, your sense of humor. And I thought, because she just slipped in there, it's what the American people have to do too. I thought, such wisdom in that. That's exactly what we need to do is, yes, we seek common ground where we can, but we stand our ground where we must. And then we don't go home and pout about it. We stay engaged with people with that same warmth. It is a kind of a dance, as Mrs. Ford would tell us. So that's my work. But I've spoken enough. I'm just curious. Any questions out here? Yes. I love that question. Thank you so much. Is there anything in the Northwest Ordinance that would help us get along better with people who do not think like us, who are, other in some significant sense, look different, have different ideas, and so forth? Go to Article 3. After the religion, morality, and knowledge clause, read the rest of Article 3 about the good faith to be shown to our Native American brothers and sisters. I need say no more. They said we need to treat them with respect and good faith and with regard to their happiness. And I've always thought, in fact, I said it last night on the panel, if we lived by the precepts, the cultural precepts, which the Constitution doesn't touch, the cultural precepts of the Northwest Ordinance, how would this country have evolved differently? If Article 3 in its fullness, its magnificence, its humanity and its compassion, had we been more successful in acting on that, how different would America be today? I know we're humans. We have flaws. We make mistakes. Sometimes we do terrible things. I can't help but think, had we adopted the Northwest Ordinance, not just by a vote, but in our hearts, and if our youth got that, and they saw that this meant a great journey for them in learning to live with people, learning from them, I can't help but think we'd be a much happier nation.
What else?
Very good. I thank you for coming out today. Enjoy. There's things going on throughout the park. I thank you, Scott. Thank you, Nancy, Todd,